In today's lesson, we are going to read a news article together. We will look at the vocabulary, the grammar and the pronunciation. And after we have analysed the text, we will go back to the beginning and I will read the article from the beginning until the end. This is your opportunity to practice your listening skills, or you can read along with me to practice your pronunciation and your intonation. If you're ready, let's take a look at today's article. Welcome to today's article. This article is taken from One Stop English, which has been adapted from an article in the Guardian newspaper. And today's title is Schools in England Using Airbnb Style Strategy to Raise Funds. Okay, so let's start with Airbnb style. Here we have a compound adjective. Okay, so this is a technique that writers use to avoid making long and awkward relative clauses. Another slightly strange way of saying this would be, there are schools in England which are using a strategy to raise funds that is similar in style to Airbnb. It's a very long, awkward sentence. So it's like in the style of Airbnb. Most of us know the platform Airbnb, where you can rent properties for a day, for a weekend, for a week. It's most common when people go on holiday, but it's also used in other ways too. To raise funds. Okay. To raise funds is a collocation. Two words that often go together, and it means to make money. Okay, to make money. Okay. So they are using a strategy to make money. Here we have another compound adjective, cash-strapped. Now, cash-strapped means not having enough money. Okay, it comes from the expression, the idiom, to be strapped for cash. To not have much money. Okay, to be strapped for cash. So schools that don't have much money are turning to renting out. Actually, here we have two phrasal verbs together. Wow. So to turn to means to ask for support or help. Okay. Renting out. To rent out is to offer for rent. Okay. So landlords, the people who own houses or property, rent out their properties to tenants, okay, to offer for rent. Their spaces commercially used for online platforms. So this paragraph here basically means that schools that don't have much money are starting to or asking to rent out, to offer for rent their spaces, the space that they have at the school, to online platforms. So we know about all of the different online platforms. They often need a backdrop or a location to do their filming. And in some cases, schools can be that perfect solution for them. They have big spaces and they have big spaces and unique spaces that can be interesting for people who use online platforms. Okay. Schools are turning to. There's that phrasal verb again. They are looking to do something or they are asking to do something. Airbnb type. So very similar to Airbnb style, another compound adjective. Airbnb type tactics. Tactics is another word for a strategy to raise much needed funds. Okay, so we saw raise funds to make money, much needed. Here we have another compound adjective. Another compound adjective. Funds, money that is needed a lot, is needed very much. Okay. Renting out every available space from classrooms to canteens. Okay, so all the way from classrooms to the canteen, which is the dining room where the students eat. So here we're looking at the wide range of space that the school has available to rent. Holding puppy training in their car parks. Okay, a place where people can train their puppies, their young dogs. And wrestling competitions in their gyms. Okay, so wrestling is a sport and they are using the school gyms to hold the competitions. One state school. This is an interesting point, actually. So a state school is confusing. In England or in the UK, a state school is a publicly funded school. Okay. So many people find this a little bit confusing because when people talk about a public school boy or girl, they're often referring to somebody who's actually been privately educated, which can be incredibly confusing. So to avoid that confusion, we will usually say a state school. And a state school is one that is funded by the state or by the public, which asks to remain anonymous. So they don't want to give their name. Said it raised over £700,000 in letting fees last year. Okay, so letting is another term for renting. Okay, renting out. Fees is the tariff or the price that they charged to rent out their rooms. So in that year, they rented out the spaces in their school, and the total of that came to over £700,000. That's an incredibly huge amount of money for a school. But many others are also raising substantial sums, large amounts, by becoming increasingly innovative in the spaces they rent out. Okay, so innovative is thinking in a slightly different way, thinking outside the box. Wyville Primary School in Vauxhall, southwest London, rents out its light-filled white corridor. Again, we've got another example of a compound adjective. Light-filled white corridor. So a white corridor that obviously gets a lot of light. It could be natural light or artificial light, but in any case, it's a bright white corridor for photo shoots. So it's a perfect place to take photos. New Rickstones Academy in Witham, Essex is offering its beauty room to anyone who wants a high-quality hair and beauty salon. There are some academies and schools and colleges in the UK that have vocational courses. And as part of those vocational courses, they'll often have dedicated spaces for that course, which is perfect when you want to use a beauty salon or a kitchen or a lab. Stroud Green School in East London is offering a well-lit hall for music, dance, or theatre rehearsals or film photo shoots. Okay, so well-lit. Okay, remember, lit is actually the past of the verb to light. Okay, so we've got a hall which has good lighting. It's light, lit, lit. Light, lit, lit. A lot of people don't remember that one. So light a candle. I light a candle every night. Last night, I lit a candle to relax. All schools are looking for unique ways to raise additional revenue. A unique way, a one-off or an unusual way to raise additional revenue. Revenue is another word for income. Okay. In the UK, we have the Inland Revenue, which is the organization that collects the taxes, the government income. And we thought our bus could be an unusual, characterful, and fun way to potentially do that. Okay. To do that refers back to raise the additional revenue. So to avoid repeating raise additional revenue, we just used that instead. While at the same time also getting our school more known in the local community, said Tahira Khan, the school's business manager. Okay, so in this school, they even have a business manager. I'm not sure that is common in every UK school, and it wasn't when I was at school. Maybe things are changing. I don't know. Schools typically advertise through a range of dedicated online platforms. So here we've got the verb to advertise. Okay. Now, remember, the noun in British English is advertisement. The stress is different to the American advertisement. Schools typically advertise through a range of dedicated online platforms. So a range of, a variety of, many different options. One primary school in Brent that uses the Sharesy platform, that's the name of the platform, has generated £21,800 so far this year and expects to exceed £25,000 by the end of 2023. Okay, so here, look, we've used has exceeded. So we've made use here of the present perfect, or the writer has made use of the present perfect. Now, the reason they've done that is because so far this year, at that point when the article was written, let's just double check the date. Yeah, November 2023, the year had not finished. And so that is why they use the present perfect. Remember, the present perfect refers to something that began in the past and has some sort of connection with the present. In this case, the connection with the present is that the year at that point had not finished. And to talk about their expectations or the predictions, they use expect to do something by the end of 2023. So remember, that's in November 2023. They still had nearly another 2 months to raise this extra amount of money. Schools aren't naturally commercial. Okay, so it's not something that they typically are associated with, but they're having to think of additional revenue streams. Okay, a stream is like a small river, but it can also be used to talk about income streams, money that flows in like a river, like small rivers, into the pot, the collective pot, and are becoming increasingly innovative. There's a repetition of what we saw earlier here. Where did we see innovative? Increasingly innovative. So here we've got a repetition, really focusing on the innovation that the schools are having to use to make this extra money that they need. Even though, contrast, okay, despite, even though the obvious options of the playing fields and main halls remain the main money spinners. Okay, so traditionally, the typical things that schools rented out were their playing fields, because most schools in the UK have a big green space to play team sports, football, rugby, hockey, athletics in the summer. And they have matches in the evening, sometimes at the weekends, competing against other local schools. And the main halls, which in British schools is the main area where they have the gatherings. So in many schools, they have a meeting every day or at least every week where all of the children, either from the whole school or if it's a very big school, from the whole year, will come together. And usually a teacher or various teachers will stand at the front and talk to them about whatever the topic of the assembly is that day or that week. So these are quite big spaces which you can rent out for various means. They remain the main money spinners. Okay, so a money spinner is a thing that generates money. Okay, a thing that generates money, said Felix Atkin, founder and CEO of Sharesy. Remember, Sharesy is that platform that was referred to in paragraph 5. We have special needs schools. Special needs schools are schools that are dedicated to making sure that children with extra, additional special needs get the support that they need. That have sensory rooms. These are rooms dedicated to develop the senses of these children with special needs. And soft play areas. Soft play areas are areas where children can play in a safe environment. So it's like an indoor park and everything is really well protected and padded, usually for younger children or children with special needs, so that they can play in a safe environment. These are particularly popular to rent out for children's parties. Logically, it's an area where children can play and can generate up to £300 a party, he said. Okay, so generate is to make or create. We also have schools that rent out their car parks at the weekends for puppy training and food markets. Okay, so many schools have dedicated car parks for the teachers and the parents to park. Obviously, schools are Monday to Friday, so at the weekends, these car parks are completely empty and are ideal for these types of events. Head teachers have said that education is in danger of being reduced to a bare bones boilerplate model. So here we have an example of the present perfect. because teachers said this in the past. They are still saying it now, and they probably will continue to say this in the future. That's the reason why we have used the present perfect here, or the present perfect has been used. So they are saying that education is in danger, and the danger is that it will be reduced to, which means limited to, or taken down to a level of a bare bones boilerplate model. Bare bones means just not having enough, just barely enough. Think about the bones of something, the bare bones. If you can see the bones of somebody, they don't have enough food. In this case, schools do not have enough money or enough funding to do what they need and want to be able to do. A boilerplate model is an unoriginal model. Okay, so schools are just, every school is the same, and there's not enough money, there's not enough funding to do what the schools need to do. The head teachers are the teachers who are in charge of the school. So they have been teachers for a number of years usually, and then later they get promoted to first, usually deputy head teacher, which is somewhere in the middle, and then finally head teacher. And so they are in charge of managing the school. In October in England, budgets were slashed. Okay, that's a fabulous verb there, isn't it? To slash something is to cut something very, very deeply. Okay, so this use of an extreme verb here to really emphasize how much budgets were cut. The budget is the amount of money that the school has to spend. They were slashed even further, so even more, even deeper, after a government blunder, government mistake. Blunder is a mistake. Cut £370 million from money they had been promised in July. Okay, so according to the article, the government made a mistake, and this resulted in the schools receiving £370 million less in their budgets than what they had been promised in July. So a big, big amount of money. In a small study this year, Sharesy, remember that's the company, the platform, found that 87% of 50 schools not listed on their platform rent out their venues to cover staffing costs. Okay, so staffing cost is the amount that it costs to pay the staff, the people who work at the school. So that may be to do with the teachers themselves or the supply teachers. The supply teachers are the teachers who come in to cover when a regular teacher is sick. It could be the cleaners. It could be the staff who take care of the children during the lunch break. Traditionally, they were called dinner ladies. Okay, I'm not sure if they still call them that now. But dinner ladies were usually the women, often mums of some of the kids who went to the school, who came to help out during the lunch break. So some of them actually were in the kitchen making the lunch, because children in the UK often eat their lunch at school. Sometimes it's a hot lunch cooked at the school, and you also have the option of taking a packed lunch where your parents prepare the food at home and you take it and then you eat it almost like a picnic at school. So these are also costs that have to be covered by the schools. Concerns have been raised, however, that the line between education and commercialism could become too blurred. The line becomes blurred. So if lines become blurred, it's not clear. Not clear. Okay. So it's not clear where the line is, where education stops and commercialism begins. So that is where this can become quite controversial. Some communities have protested, remember that's to show your disagreement publicly, after their local schools mooted. Mooted is suggested for discussion, okay, to put the idea forward. So they put the idea forward of selling advertising space inside and on the sides of their buildings. So you've seen billboards or advertising spaces everywhere. Well, the schools were talking about putting it in their buildings and on the sides of the schools as well. So maybe for some communities that was a step too far. Brandon Bennett from School Space said schools were hosting an increasingly wide range of after-hours activities. Okay, so look at this example of reported speech, actually. Look at this. So Brandon Bennett said, We know say is one of the most common reporting verbs. So he said schools were hosting. So remember, with reported speech, we go back one step. So the direct speech was schools are hosting. Hosting is when you have something, you hold an event. Okay, so he said in his direct speech, schools are hosting. And when we transform that into indirect speech or reported speech, we usually go back one step. So the present continuous becomes the past continuous. Schools were hosting an increasingly wide range, so a bigger variety of after hours activities that happen after normal school hours. More or less, school hours in the UK are about 9 until 3:30. It depends on the school. School Space and our partner Tutti Space target creators, people doing music videos, interviews, film and photo shoots, recording, performances, to help them find niche spaces. Niche is like very specific or unusual. So in your niche is your very narrow target audience. The film and TV industry particularly are always looking for interesting spaces. Ooh, look at this pronunciation. Note how I pronounce this word. Interesting. Interesting. This E is silent. Remember, if you don't know about this, I've got quite a few short videos about when we need to drop a syllable, but it's quite common in multiple syllable words in English to cut one of the syllables. Okay, so interesting spaces that match the script they're working on. Remember, the script is the written form of what the actors or actresses will say. We've had requests for science labs, specific looking corridors that could double as a hospital perhaps, and other niche requests. We've facilitated, so we've made something happen, weekend markets to wrestling events. Again, all this contrast, all the way from markets where locals go to buy food or other products to wrestling events, really specific sporting events. Average yearly, so what people make in a year, incomes for schools on School Spaces platform is £88,800, with their biggest school earner making £228,199. Let's practice that again. 228,100 and remember the and £199. £228,199 in lettings, rentals, booked this year. We see an average increase in income of 170% in the first 6 months of handling lettings for schools. So in the first 6 months that the schools use this platform, they see their income increase by 170%. Wow, that's way more than double. Some of the biggest secondary schools are making both a saving and an income by installing solar panels on their roofs. If a school is big enough, it can make money both by replacing its main electricity and through the profits that come through as additional income. So in the UK, if you install solar panels, not only do you then reduce or eliminate even your electricity bill, in many cases, you can sell back the extra electricity that you generate to the board, to the electricity board, whichever one that may be. They pay you for the electricity that you produce. So it's a win-win situation in that case. Schools massively welcome the relief. Remember, relief is this feeling of being able to be relaxed, to have peace. This gives their finances. They tell me they spend the money on stationery. So that's pens, paper, pencils, all the things that the schools need. In the UK, it's common for, at least in primary schools, for the school to supply the majority of, if not all of the stationery. So all of the pencils, the paper, the pens, etc., so that the parents then don't have to buy that. It's, if I remember correctly, it's different in secondary schools, but at least in primary schools, the parents don't have to pay for That's stationery. So it's provided by the schools. And obviously, it quickly becomes very expensive for anybody who's had to buy school supplies. You know the cost of all of this stationery. Renting out car parks on sites such as your parking space and Just Park is another popular option. Many schools take advantage of, right, is to make the best of a situation. Also, make the most of is another way to say the same thing. Make the most of. Their proximity, how close they are, to sporting and entertainment venues to offer space during weekends. Some even undercut. To undercut somebody or something is to be cheaper than. To be cheaper than. Local parking charges. So parking can be very expensive, especially in cities. And so people, locals who want to go to the town or want to go to a sporting event, if they can find parking a little bit cheaper, then they're going to take advantage of that. One further education college in Oxford charges less than the council. So many car parks in the UK are run by the local council, and shopping centre for parking at weekends. Okay, so it's cheaper to park at the educational college than at the council-run car parks or even at the shopping centre. Some shopping centres have free car parks, but some also charge. Charlie Gothold from School Hire said that schools were able to undercut local businesses because any extra money they can raise is a plus. Whereas local businesses have to cover their costs and then make a profit, a school doesn't have to cover their costs because it's already covered by the fact that they are a school. They are subsidized by the government at the end of the day, by our taxes. And so anything extra that they make is theirs to keep. Gothold said that the only limit is schools' ability to have enough staff, remember that's people working, to handle, to manage the administration and be on site, to be at the school when the bookings take place. Okay, schools have to have the staff to cope with what is like a business. They need someone doing the admin, and someone has to be there to open and close the premises and make sure that people renting the space are behaving. So obviously, not all schools are going to have this type of person. Maybe they have to hire somebody externally to cover this. Most schools do have a caretaker and admin staff, but obviously their job is not to manage things outside of the school's day-to-day runnings. So sometimes they may have to hire an additional person to manage this, or even to subcontract another company. And then things start to get a little bit more complicated. And as we saw earlier here, the lines can become a little bit blurred. Remember, things are not clear. They can become a little bit blurred between education and commercialism. So that line is not clear. So let's go back to the beginning of the article and read it. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, you can listen and read along, or even read aloud with me, and you can practice your pronunciation, your intonation. Don't forget to pay attention to that connected speech as well. Cash-strapped schools are turning to renting out their spaces commercially using online platforms. Amelia Hill, 8th of November, 2023. Schools are turning to Airbnb-type tactics to raise much-needed funds, renting out every available space from classrooms to canteens, holding puppy training in their car parks and wrestling competitions in their gyms. One state school, which asked to remain anonymous, said it raised over £700,000 in letting fees last year. But many others are also raising substantial sums by becoming increasingly innovative in the spaces they rent out. Wyville Primary School in Vauxhall, southwest London, rents out its light-filled white corridor for photo shoots. New Rickstones Academy in Witham, Essex, is offering its beauty room to anyone who wants a high-quality hair and beauty salon. Stroud Green School in East London is offering a well-lit hall for music, dance, or theatre rehearsals or film photo shoots. All schools are looking for unique ways to raise additional revenue, And we thought our bus could be an unusual, characterful, and fun way to potentially do that, while also getting our school more known in the local community, said Tahira Khan's, the school's business manager. Schools typically advertise through a range of dedicated online platforms. One primary school in Brent that uses the Sharesy platform has generated £21,800 so far this year and expects to exceed £25,000 by the end of 2023. Schools aren't naturally commercial, but they're having to think of additional revenue streams and are becoming increasingly innovative, even though the obvious options of the playing fields and main halls remain the main money spinners, said Felix Atkin, founder and CEO of Sharesy. We have special needs schools that have sensory rooms and soft play areas. These are particularly popular to rent out for children's parties and can generate up to £300 a party, he said. We also have schools that rent out their car parks at the weekends for puppy training and food markets. Head teachers have said that education is in danger of being reduced to a bare-bones boilerplate model. In October, in England, budgets were slashed even further after a government blunder cut £370 million from money that had been promised in July. In a small study this year, Sharesy found that 87% of 50 schools not listed on their platform rent out their venues to cover staffing costs. Concerns have been raised, however, that the line between education and commercialism could become too blurred. Some communities have protested after their local schools mooted selling advertising space inside and on the sides of their buildings. Brandon Bennett from School Space said schools were hosting an increasingly wide range of after-hours activities. School Space and our partner Tutti Space target creators, people doing music videos, interviews, film and photo shoots, recordings, performances, to help them find niche spaces, he said. The film and TV industry particularly are always looking for interesting spaces that match the script they're working on. We've had requests for science labs, specific-looking corridors that could double as a hospital perhaps, and other niche requests. We facilitated weekend markets to wrestling events. Average yearly incomes for schools on School Space's platform is £88,800, with their biggest school earner making £228,199 in lettings booked this year. We see an average increase in income of 170% in the first 6 months of handling lettings for schools, he said. Some of the biggest secondary schools are making both a saving and an income by installing solar panels on their roofs. If a school is big enough, it can make money both by replacing its main electricity and through the profits that come through as additional income, said Anne Flaherty, the director of Solar for Schools. Schools massively welcome the relief this gives their finances. They tell me they spend the money on stationery and books. Renting out school car parks on sites such as Your Parking Space and Just Park is another popular option. Many schools take advantage of their proximity to sporting and entertainment venues to offer space during weekends. Some even undercut local parking charges. One further education college in Oxford charges less than the council and shopping centre for parking at weekends. Charlie Gothold from School Hire said that schools were able to undercut local businesses because any extra money they can raise is a plus. Gothold said the only limit is schools' ability to have enough staff to handle the administration and be on site when the bookings take place. Schools have to have the staff to cope with what is like a business. They need someone doing the admin and someone has to be there to open and close the premises and make sure that people renting the space are behaving, he said. That is it for today's lesson. I just have a couple of discussion questions for you. Don't forget to leave me a comment below with your points of view on this topic. And today's questions are, what do you think of this initiative? And should schools be used for commercial gains? And if so, how should that money be spent? That's it from me today. Thank you so much for watching. See you again in the next lesson.